Ever feel like, I don't know, the economy's kind of rigged, like you're working harder and harder but not getting ahead?
Right, it's like you're stuck on a treadmill.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
But what if there's a totally different way to play the game?
What if instead of all this competition, we had an economy built on cooperation, sustainability, fairness? That's the whole idea behind the solidarity economy, and it's really gaining traction.
It's true. And today we're taking a deep dive into this with Emily Kawano, a real leading voice in this whole solidarity economy movement.
And what's so cool about her work is it's not just theory, right? She's pointing to real world stuff, actual people building this new economy right now.
Exactly, putting it into action.
Yeah.
So how do we even define solidarity economy? Sounds kind of broad.
It is a bit, yeah. Don't think of it as some rigid system. It's more like a shared set of values. You use these values to guide, like, economic activity.
Values, okay.
And it's not like these ideas are brand new either. A lot of them come from marginalized communities who they've been building their own support systems, their own resilience for a long time.
Creating their own systems because the existing ones weren't working.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's get into some of these core principles. Kawano talks about solidarity, equity, participatory democracy, sustainability, and pluralism. 5 big ones.
Yeah.
But I got to ask, when we say solidarity, what are we even talking about here?
It's more than just like cooperating. It's about building these really strong relationships, interdependence, mutual support. Think about what holds communities together, especially in tough times.
Right, like after a hurricane or a fire, you see neighbors helping neighbors. Or when a local business is struggling, the whole community rallies around it.
Exactly. It's about recognizing we're all in this together, taking care of each other. And Kawano, she reminds us that a huge part of this often gets totally overlooked.
What's that?
All the unpaid care work.
Oh, man. Tell me about it.
Seriously. It keeps societies functioning, childcare, taking care of the elderly, all this essential stuff.
Essential, but often completely devalued in our economy.
Totally. And she actually puts a dollar figure on it, something like $11 trillion globally.
11 trillion. Get out of here.
$11 trillion of essential labor, mostly done by women. That doesn't even show up in things like, GDP.
It's wild.
Yeah.
So much value that we don't even account for.
Exactly. And this ties right into that principle of equity. Historically, solidarity economics, it came from these marginalized groups who are like, okay, the system's not working for us. We're going to create our own solutions.
Love it. Like that saying, if you want something done right.
Right. And we're not just talking about small-scale stuff either. Think about the landless workers movement in Brazil.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Millions of people. They've gained access to land through this collective action. They're creating a more just food system.
That's amazing, taking their economic destinies into their own hands. It reminds me of that next principle, participatory democracy.
Totally. It's about making sure everyone has a voice, especially in their workplace, in their communities, not like the top-down stuff we're used to.
Right, so instead of a CEO making all the decisions, imagine a company where workers have a say. They decide how things are run, how profits get shared, what the company values are.
Boom. You just described a worker cooperative, one of the fundamental building blocks of a solidarity economy.
Worker cooperatives. Sounds great on paper, right?
Yeah.
But do they actually work in the real world?
Oh, they totally can. And Kawano gives some really cool examples. Like, have you heard of the Mondragon Corporation in Spain?
Monterey, yeah, isn't it huge? Like a whole city run by, like, worker owners?
It's massive and seriously impressive. They've managed to be successful, like economically sustainable, but also socially responsible.
How does that work? What's their secret?
Well, their governance structure is really unique. Workers have a direct say in how things are run, how profits are shared.
So it's not just about, like, making as much money as possible.
Right. It's about making sure everyone benefits. Mondragon shows that worker co-ops can totally compete out there in the world, but they can also put things like employee well-being, fair wages, and community development front and center.
That's awesome. It really challenges that old capitalist idea that profits are everything.
100%.
Okay, so we've talked about solidarity, equity, participatory democracy. What about sustainability? That's another big one in the solidarity economy. How does that fit in?
It's huge, right? And again, it's bigger than just like being green. It's about realizing that our economy, it has to work within the limits of our planet, period.
Right. We can't just keep growing forever on a finite planet.
Exactly. Kawano talks about shifting away from this constant pursuit of growth, the kind of growth that often wrecks the environment and uses up all our resources.
So maybe instead of always wanting more, It's about figuring out what we really need and finding ways to make that happen sustainably and fairly.
Yeah, and she talks about this concept of buen vivir.
Buen vivir, what's that?
It means living well, but not in that materialistic way, you know? It's about living in harmony with each other, any in nature, prioritizing well-being over just like having a ton of stuff.
I like that, buen vivir. It makes you realize our well-being is tied to the health of our communities and the planet. It's all connected.
Totally. And that actually leads us to that principle of pluralism. See, there's no one right way to build a solidarity economy.
Right, because every place is different. Different communities, different needs, different resources.
Exactly. So it's not about saying, here's the system, everyone follow it. It's about encouraging a bunch of different solutions that work for each local situation.
Kind of like a buffet of options.
Yeah. Kawano actually uses a really cool analogy to explain this. She compares all the different solidarity economy initiatives out there to imaginal cells.
Imaginal cells. That sounds kind of sci-fi. What are those?
Okay, so you know how a caterpillar transforms into a butterfly?
Yeah.
Imaginal cells are those little things inside the caterpillar that have the potential to make that transformation happen.
Oh, interesting.
But they have to connect and work together to actually create the butterfly. And it's similar with all these different efforts. We're talking about worker co-ops, community gardens, time banks. They're like those imaginal cells. They each carry a piece of the puzzle for a new economic model.
So how do we get those imaginal cells, those little sparks, to link up and create something bigger? What does that actually look like in the real world? So we've got these imaginal cells, these sparks of something new. What are some concrete examples of them coming together? What does a solidarity economy look like in action?
Well, we already talked about worker cooperatives, right? Like Mondragon. But let's look at housing for a second. Specifically, community land trusts. CLTs.
Right, CLTs. They're tackling that whole problem of housing becoming just another commodity,
Yeah.
people buying it up, flipping it, pushing out the people who actually live there.
Exactly. CLTs, they take the land out of that whole speculative market. They own it collectively. And then the homeowners, they lease the land under their homes.
So you own your house, but the community owns the ground it sits on, keeps it affordable.
Permanently affordable, yeah.
That's brilliant. Didn't Kawano mention the Champlain Housing Trust in Vermont?
She did. It's a fantastic example. They've provided thousands of people with affordable homes, secure homes, and they've even incorporated things like community gardens, shared spaces, builds that sense of belonging.
It's like instead of just throwing money at the problem, they're changing the rules of the game to make it fair.
Exactly. That's the power of this whole solidarity economy thing. It's not about just like tweaking the system we have. It's about rethinking the whole thing. How we value resources, how we value each other's work, how we value each other as human beings.
It's happening all over the place, right? We see it with time banks where you exchange skills and services without even using money. Local food systems, CSAs, connecting people directly to their food, to the farmers.
Public banking, too, where the banks actually work for the community, not just for profit. Kawano talks about North Dakota. They've got that state-owned bank.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
It's been around for over 100 years, super successful, investing in local businesses, infrastructure.
100 years. See, that's what I'm talking about. It's not
Yeah.
some pie-in-the-sky idea these things work.
Totally. And look, as our current system, keeps showing its cracks, these alternatives are going to become more and more important. They're a way forward, a practical way forward, but also a way that's rooted in, in justice, in sustainability, and human dignity.
It's exciting. It really is. But Kawano doesn't just sugarcoat it either. She talks about the challenges, too. Like, how do we even decide what counts as a solidarity economy, business, or organization? Where do you draw the line?
Right. And there are these ongoing debates, totally. Like, what about businesses with a social mission? They're doing good, but they're not set up as co-ops. Do they count?
And how do you work within the system, like pushing for policy changes, at the same time as you're building these alternatives outside the system? It's tricky.
100%. And it's a lot to think about. But that's where Kawano, she leaves us with this really thought-provoking question. What if we are the imaginal cells?
Whoa. Okay, yeah. We talked about those cells transforming the caterpillar. She's saying each of us, by living these values, solidarity, equity, sustainability, we can be part of a much bigger transformation.
Exactly. It's a call to action. We're not just along for the ride in this economy. We can shape it through our choices, what we buy, how we work, how we participate in these alternatives.
I love that.
Yeah.
So to everyone listening, if you're feeling, a little disillusioned with the way things are, if you're looking for a different way, a better way, just remember, There are other ways to do this whole economy thing. The seeds are already there.
The question is, what part will you play in helping them grow?